Alright, what's up everybody? So we had our second gameplay showcase for Hogwarts Legacy earlier this week. Over 35 minutes long, I think it was. By now we have pretty much over an hour, I think, of gameplay footage revealed to us already. And yeah, I gotta say, it's becoming a lot clearer to me what kind of game we're dealing with. When Hogwarts Legacy was originally announced, it really looked sort of like a dream come true, right? The ultimate Harry Potter experience is what we were going to get, and it's still looking like that in all fairness. I gotta start off by simply mentioning how this game is constantly reminding me how much nostalgia I still carry for the Harry Potter franchise in general, to the point where I had honestly forgotten it before the announcement of this game. I used to be a huge Harry Potter fan back in my childhood, right? I read all the books, watched the movies, you know, God knows how many times, and of course I played the games alongside of that, whether it was sort of the early movie versions, so, you know, like Chamber of Secrets and Prisoner of Azkaban. I played those back on the Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance, go figure. And then also some of the later ones, like Order of the Phoenix. That was actually the first game I bought along with my PlayStation 3 back in 2008. So, and, you know, that's what the Order of the Phoenix, I think, did so well, along with Half-Blood Prince as well. They gave you that ultimate Hogwarts experience, right? Getting to actually roam the castle and feeling like you were a student in that universe. That's what I loved about them so much. But I also realized that it was, I think, the last time we ever got to have a game like that, right? And it's very strange because now you go back and you watch some of the footage, and I realized that, like, even though it succeeded very well at well, exactly accomplishing that goal of getting you to explore Hogwarts, there wasn't much more to it, right? I mean, they had Quidditch, which was like an on-rails go and, you know, like chase the stars or whatever type of mini game, and there was like a little potions game that they had created, I guess, and there was some combat which was super light, didn't even have a HUD, didn't even really have much of a choice out of many different spells. It was just bare bones at the end of the day. And so you go and check out all this gameplay for Hogwarts Legacy now, and you're realizing that, like, just the ways in which they've expanded, the ways in which they've clearly, and that's the thing that I do want to point out about it, they are clearly just looking at all the popular games right now and taking all the best elements from that and trying to combine it to form this ultimate Harry Potter experience. But there isn't necessarily anything new about it from what I'm seeing. It's just going to be exactly what a Harry Potter fan would want. There is, of course, absolutely nothing wrong with that, and also, as I just basically tried to describe, they are making it more of a game than ever, which is only a good thing in my book. But, you know, I obviously do want to talk about what of the game they have shown so far then, and, you know, what I still have perhaps some reservations about. I'm just going to be, you know, as you know me, very critical and simply looking at every single facet and trying to honestly judge right now how it's looking. So I want to start by just talking about Hogwarts in itself. Because Hogwarts is, don't be mistaken, that's the real protagonist of this game. It's not the character you play as. It's just really visible how much effort they've put into the environments of this game alone. You know, it's not even the most graphically impressive game, I would say, looking at it now. Of course, this is a cross-gen title, so will be coming out across both last generation as well as this one. Although the last-gen versions recently have gotten delayed for a couple months, I saw, which is a little sketchy, but yeah, again, graphically not the most impressive, but I feel like it's just the attention to detail that they put into everything, right? The way that every room seems stuffed with objects, but the way in which all those objects then move at the same time. How you can walk down a staircase and just see a ghost literally sliding down with you or something. You know, all those little touches that they added to it. You have all the different common rooms, of course, which have a completely different design. The Room of Requirement, which they talked about, that you can actually design a little bit yourself, right? You can customize it, you can place objects in it, make them, you know, smaller or bigger, depending on your own taste, change the colors of them. They give you a lot of customization options in general. Of course, that also pertains to your character, and we've seen all of that. Just, you know, so much attention to detail, like I said, customization in general, and I can obviously really appreciate that. Hogwarts in general looks beautiful. I remember, you know, with previous games, it would always be sort of this question that was up in the air, like, oh, are they going to make us be able to go to, for example, the Owlery? Or Hogwarts would just always end up looking a little bit differently depending on which, you know, game entry you played. And in this one, they are taking everything into account, and it's going to be the most vast, expansive. They're not going to miss a single area, is what I'm trying to say. And of course, the way that is becoming most visible is by the fact that it's not just Hogwarts, which is going to be in this game, but I love how what they essentially decided to do is take the outside area surrounding Hogwarts and just turn that into a massive open world, where not only will you be able to go to Hogsmeade and to the train station that they have, right, and the Forbidden Forest, and all the locations that we're so familiar with from the books and the movies, but they've just taken all the fields in that area, and you can travel across them too with your broom or with, like, one of the fantastic beasts that you apparently can control. Yeah, there's swamps, there's all kinds of areas, and everything is, of course, filled with plenty of quest markers and collectibles and things to do, so I feel like you're gonna spend basically just as much time outside of Hogwarts as inside, and it's all gonna add up to being this massive cohesive experience, which once again, that's only something I can appreciate. Yeah, they specifically focused on the broom flights, for example, in the most recent gameplay demo, and even there it was interesting how they showed us the way that they actually limit you, for example, in traveling upwards too much. After a certain while, you basically have a bar that keeps running down, and if the bar, you know, if you run out of broom stamina, I guess, then you're essentially forced to just go down again and sort of more hover over the ground. And the same thing goes with your hippogriff or whatever you're controlling, where the game is essentially forcing you to just more ride it like an animal, turning it literally into that more traditional open world, maybe, you know, think of The Witcher or Red Dead Redemption style exploration. And then apparently as you progress, you're gonna be able to more use that broom for, like, actually literally flying over the map once you're already familiar with it. So I see what they're trying to do with the exploration, and I very much appreciate it. Now, a big part, I think, of that exploration is, of course, collectibles. And this is also another thing that I realized going back to rewatch some of the footage of, for example, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. You had 150 different crests that you could collect there across the map. And of course, that very much incentivized you to explore every little nook and cranny that there was for Hogwarts. Now, Hogwarts Legacy here is, I think, doing a similar thing, although it's a little, you know, unclear how the collectible system is going to work, how many different types there are, for example. And what I do want to talk about is the spell system, because I think they're doing something very interesting with it, where, you know, they're keeping most of it, that's the thing, still secret from us for now. There's about 20 plus spells you apparently have in total, but all of them seem to have uses in both combat as well as the environment, and that's what I like so much, right? So we've seen, for example, the main character use the Accio spell, which is always used to, you know, pull something towards you. We've seen him use it both in the environment, where he was standing on a certain platform, using it to get the platform to move, or for example, there were these pages whirling around, which you could simply collect by using the spell then. However, you can use that same spell in combat to actually pull an enemy towards you for more close range combat too. So that's really nice. And in that same vein, you know, we know that there's obviously going to be Wingardium Leviosa, and there's going to be Lumos, and all the typical spells that we know. They're kind of divided in categories, so all those categories have a different color too. But what I was wondering about is, like, I really hope that what they've done with the collectibles, is that they've sort of turned them into puzzles more, and that they challenge you to think about, okay, which spell do I actually have to use to collect a certain one? I hope it's not going to be the simple thing of, like, oh, there's just 100 different of these pages that you can come across in Hogwarts, and you always use the same spell on them, but that they actually challenge you to think about, shit, which spell can I use here to then actually, you know, get the collectible that I'm trying to pick up here, right? That they'll make you come across a certain situation where you're supposed to lift an object up, and therefore, you know, oh, I'm gonna have to use Wingardium Leviosa, and that gets me to actually collect this particular thing. If they do that, and if they, you know, make you think outside the box even more, then that is definitely something I would like to see from the game. Now, the next thing we're really going to have to get into here is combat. And combat is what was actually most prominently shown off in the recent gameplay demo, but it's also the thing that I will say I had maybe the most reservations about beforehand. I wasn't really sure how it was going to turn out, and of course I know that it's what they struggled with a lot with prior Harry Potter games. Every single game turned out to have a different combat system again. They never found a great way to translate, I think, that spell system into core gameplay mechanics that actually felt satisfying, varied overall. And so, you know, you saw, for example, with the Deathly Hallows games that they tried to literally turn it into like a third-person cover-based shooter, and that one wasn't well received at all. And then the games before that, that were third-person at least, yeah, it was kind of too basic and bare bones, I guess. So what they've done here is essentially, looking at it right now, I'm basically like, okay, this is the same combat system that we know from a God of War. Maybe a little bit, you know, Final Fantasy VII Remake, that system too, because there's a lot of cooldowns, and that made me kind of, you know, think about that game. But again, I talked about how they seem to have been inspired just by, okay, let's take all the elements from games people already like, and we're gonna make it work. And so, you know, you essentially use R2 for standard attacks. I guess you're just gonna be kind of spamming that the whole time. And then every now and then you can hold the button, tap one of the face buttons simultaneously, and that way you select one of your more special spells, I guess, right? All of them, like I said, have different cooldowns, so I guess the stronger ones will simply take more time to recover. There's objects in the environment which have like an R1 prompt that you can use. There is blocking / countering, which apparently you use the triangle button for. You can roll to dodge spells as well. So again, it's literally the God of War combat system from what I could tell. Even a combo meter that I think builds up if you don't take any damage. And so as soon as it does, you can just hit both, you know, R1 and R2, I think, at the same time it showed. Yeah, and that way you get basically a more powerful attack that will do extra damage on enemies. It's not the most, yeah, I mean, it just doesn't look revolutionary in any way. Again, the spells obviously don't allow you to just rapidly fire them off constantly, and so everything looks a little slow and sluggish, which, you know, it's understandable. I can't really hold that against it or something either. I just don't really know how well it's going to work out. For example, there's also a large emphasis on potions, apparently. So with the L1 button, you can bring up a potions menu. And all of that is, of course, intertwined with the game in itself, where you're supposed to craft all those potions by yourself in the room of requirements. So, you know, maybe you'll have to like collect recipes and you'll have to find different ingredients. And so I get that they want to interweave all of that to have it both make sense in exploration as well as combat in itself, right? But, you know, I myself tend not to be a huge fan of like, oh, having to well, navigate around all these things in real-time gameplay then too, you know, having to use your potions and stuff. I know, once again, that if you look at a game like The Witcher 3, it had that too. I'm just saying, me personally, not always the biggest fan of it. But the other question that I really tried to ask myself is like, are they doing enough, right? Because when I think about God of War, for example, which, once again, very similar gameplay system, there is just so much more that it does. I mean, not only do you have a bunch of different weapons that you can use in that game, whereas here you're just going to be sticking to your wand constantly, right? There's not even any melee, for example, you can do either. But there is no, well, I don't know. I mean, there's not going to be an equivalent to your rage meter, or there's no actual combos you can pull off, from what I saw at least, in your spell usages or something, right? You know, where there's, yeah, again, you don't even have different attack buttons. It's basically just R2, R2, R2 constantly, and then holding it and pressing one of the face buttons for a special spell. There is no companions that you can give any assignments to, no infusing your weapons like God of War had. God of War just gave us the talismans, remember that? Like, that game gives us such a ridiculous amount of options that you can all add up together, whereas this one still feels a little basic and minimal, I guess, which again, it doesn't have to be a huge problem as long as it's fun and as long as I hope it's challenging. I hope that it's not just going to be too easy or something, and you know, that there will be several difficulty modes otherwise, because, you know, again, it's probably going to be still a huge part of the game, and so I want it to at least feel good, to provide a challenge, to be varied enough. You know, for example, you see that enemies will have these bubbles sometimes around them, which you are supposed to break by using again, like, it's pretty basic, that's the thing. They might have like a yellow-colored bubble around them, and what that means is that you'll have to select a spell out of your spell wheel that has one of the yellow colors. Which ones you pick doesn't really matter, as long as it fits that particular type. So, again, it doesn't necessarily incentivize you too much to think outside of the box there. I understand that, of course, when it comes to combat, it should be mostly action-reaction-based gameplay, but will it really matter using either Accio or a different, for example, purple-colored spell? Will any of that make much of a difference at all, or how is it all going to work out? Those are still things that I question right now from what I've seen, but again, I'm not saying it can't turn out well, I'm not saying it can't turn out to feel satisfying, but it's definitely something that I think, you know, like, the jury is still out until we actually get to play it ourselves and get to see what it feels like to take part in any of these fights. Now, I think we can slowly start working up towards a conclusion here, is that what's becoming very clear to me, not only by, well, everything I've just talked about here, I mean, it's exactly what they've decided to show off to us, right? And so what they want us to focus on is that open world, is seeing what they've created, what's going to be out there for us to explore. But it also means that, for example, story-wise, we still have very little information what the story of this game actually is going to be about. Apparently it does have a sort of linear structure to it, at least in the way that there's sequences, kind of Assassin's Creed style, and these sequences then allow you to openly pick any of the missions that you want to take on. So some of those will, for example, be classes to take, right? It's not a simulator, it's not done in the way where you actually have to take your classes at particular points in time. No, they just give you a set list of missions you can partake in, and then all of those progress the story in some type of way. As soon as you complete one of those acts, you simply move on to the next one. And then that way we also know that there's going to be different seasons, so the game will move from, like, you know, summer to autumn to winter to spring, very linearly, I guess, which all of that, you know, makes sense to me for sure. But again, story-wise, we don't have a lot of details. We know that it revolves around discovering some type of secret ancient magic, and you're working together with one of your professors. You're going up against sort of this goblin who is called Ranrock, apparently, and has his own, or leads his own rebellion, I should say. And then there's also another dark wizard, sort of Voldemort style, along with that. Some masked, you know, faction which might be working along with him, who you constantly encounter around the castle. So again, it's like elements that we know of that we're constantly going to keep running into, but what is that story going to be? It's still very unclear right now, and that might be for the reason that they simply might not feel too confident about it, right? Who knows? That's a big question still for now. I have my reservations for sure about performance. We know that it's going to have both a resolution mode and a performance mode, but what's that frame rate going to look like? Everything that's been shown off so far seems to be in 30 frames, and there's definitely some stuttering every now and then as well. So what's the, you know, are they going to be able to optimize it well in time before release, especially with the last gen versions now seemingly having been delayed a couple of months too? Like I said, combat, I've expressed some of my reservations about whether the activities in the open world are going to be too engaging is a question still for now. We also saw some of the NPC dialogue, and there too, I'm not the biggest fan of it, in all honesty. You know, we saw the main character run into a couple of students, and every time it happens, you know, the conversations that they have, they all seem kind of static. Characters are just standing still and talking. Music cuts out. It's just like, yeah, again, I have reservations there for sure. I think, like I said, the star of this show is going to be Hogwarts. The attention to detail that they've put into the environments, that they've put into Hogwarts itself, but also its surrounding fields, is something that everybody is going to appreciate about it. It will be that ultimate Harry Potter fantasy. In that way, you'll get to be a student at Hogwarts, and that's what most people want out of it. But yeah, as far as like Metacritic score or how this game will ultimately be received, I think that's very much going to depend on the context within. How good is that story going to be? What's the performance going to be like? Is the combat going to be engaging? Are the activities actually fun? In that way, once again, I think that everything is still open, and I could see this game falling anywhere in the range from a, you know, 75 to a 90, potentially. I think that's what you should expect from this game overall. That's at least what I'm expecting based on everything that I've been seeing right now. And, you know, once again, it'll still be, no doubt, a super fun experience. And as somebody like myself who still carries a lot of nostalgia for the franchise and who has played a bunch of Harry Potter games back in my youth, I definitely look forward to getting to experience, yeah, perhaps, I mean, well, I say perhaps, but no doubt the most expansive, vast Harry Potter experience in a game that we've had yet. And so that's definitely something to be looking forward to. Yeah, with that being said, guys, those were all my thoughts on Hogwarts Legacy. But of course, let me know how you feel about the game so far. What do you think of all the gameplay that they've shown so far? What are things that you still yourself have questions about, or that you want the developers to get into a little bit more to explain to us? And then with that being said, make sure, of course, that you subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, go check out my second channel where I upload reaction videos on a daily basis. And I still have, for example, my God of War Ragnarok playthrough going on right now. And then with that being said, I want to thank you all for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you back in the next video very soon.